What if the moon is not what it seems, not a companion drifting faithfully beside the Earth, but a memory the planet never finished remembering? Some nights the sky feels older than the world beneath it. The air grows quiet, the horizon softens, and above the dark water of space a pale stone lingers. A witness, not bright enough to shout, but never silent enough to forget, wherever the night has found its way tonight. Beneath quiet ceilings, beside dim windows, across distant cities or silent countryside. It is good that this moment exists, good that the sky continues its patient turning, good that the moon still rises, because some stories are not meant to be rushed. They unfold the way mountains do, slowly, quietly, one layer of time settling over another, and the moon has been waiting a very long time to be understood, and not as an object alone, but as a memory written in gravity. Tonight's story drifts through a single question. What if the moon is not what we think it is? Not simply a rock circling Earth, but a fossil of violence, silence, and forgotten beginnings, a scar that never healed. Or perhaps something stranger still, a clock, a mirror, a quiet archive of the earliest days when the young planet was still learning how to exist. The answer is buried somewhere between starlight and stone. But the search begins slowly, the way all ancient things must. Before the oceans had nearer names, before continents settled into their drifting sleep, before life whispered its first fragile chemistry into the dark. The sky already held its pale companion, or perhaps it did not, because even the moon may have once been something else entirely. The story will unfold in 7 quiet passages of time, the silent beginning of a second world. Long before forests breathed and oceans remembered their tides, the young Earth was a restless sphere of fire and molten stone. Gravity pulled dust together. Impacts stitched violence into the forming planet. The sun burned young and impatient above it all. Yet somewhere within that chaos, a second body began to shape the destiny of Earth. This chapter drifts into the earliest age of the solar system, when planets were still unfinished thoughts drifting through clouds of rock and fire. It explores the possibility that the moon was not always a quiet companion, but the result of an ancient catastrophe, a collision so immense that it reshaped the entire world. But the story will not speak in explosions, instead, and it will move through the slow language of gravity, molten oceans, and drifting fragments of a broken world. Time stretches across millions of years like cooling lava. Dust gathers, stone remembers, and somewhere above the glowing planet, a new sphere slowly begins to assemble itself. Not alive, but not entirely silent either, because the moon may have formed from Earth's own wounded past, a second world born from the memory of impact. Ashes in the orbit of memory. Once the ancient collision scattered fragments into orbit, something strange began to happen. The debris did not drift away into darkness. Gravity whispered to it, quietly, persistently, and so the scattered ashes of 2 worlds began circling one another. This chapter lingers in the slow dance of cosmic debris, molten stone drifting through the newborn sky. Her particles colliding, merging, separating again. Over thousands of years, a ring forms around Earth, a silent halo of broken geology. But rings do not last forever. Gradually, gravity gathers the fragments together. Small bodies merge into larger ones. The fragments learn a shared orbit. The ring begins to collapse inward, shaping itself into something round, something familiar, and eventually something that will watch the oceans rise and fall for billions of years. Yet hidden inside this slow birth is a deeper mystery. The moon's chemistry does not behave exactly as expected. Its rocks resemble Earth's mantle too closely. Its orbit is strangely perfect for stabilizing the planet below, almost as though the collision that formed it did more than create a satellite. Perhaps it rewrote the future of life itself. Yet the tides that remember. Once the moon settled into orbit, something subtle began to change on Earth. Water began to move differently. The oceans lifted and fell under a quiet gravitational rhythm, pulled gently by the distant mass overhead. These tides shaped coastlines, stirred chemistry, and guided the earliest rhythms of life. This chapter drifts through the slow influence of lunar gravity, not as a forceful pull, but as a breath. Each tide carries a fragment of ancient physics. The rise and fall of water becomes the planet's heartbeat. Shorelines evolve under the moon's quiet supervision. Some scientists believe this tidal rhythm may have helped early molecules gather into living systems. If so, the moon did not simply accompany life. It may have helped compose its first fragile sentences. Water remembers the pull of gravity, even when the tide retreats. The slow lock between two worlds. Over time, something curious happened between Earth and its companion. The moon stopped spinning freely. Instead, one face turned permanently toward Earth, while the other remained hidden forever in darkness. This phenomenon, known quietly as tidal locking, is the result of gravitational patience. Over millions of years, friction inside the moon slowly synchronized its rotation with its orbit. The result is a permanent relationship between two celestial bodies. Earth always sees the same lunar face. The far side remains unseen from the ground, a silent hemisphere that only spacecraft have glimpsed. This chapter moves through the strange intimacy created by gravity between two worlds that will never truly escape one another, and a cosmic partnership not chosen, but inevitable, the side of the moon that waited in silence. For most of human history, half the moon remained unknown. No telescope could see it. No imagination could reach it fully. The far side waited in darkness. Only in the 20th century did machines drift around the moon and reveal its hidden face, and what they found was unexpectedly different. The near side is smooth and dark in places, but filled with ancient lava plains, but the far side is rugged, scarred, just covered in thick crust and endless craters. Why should one half of the moon look so different from the other? This chapter explores the geological asymmetry of the moon and the quiet scientific mysteries that still linger in its rocks. The moon does not reveal its history easily. At its surface keeps secrets the way deserts keep footprints, slowly erased. The long drift of a growing distance. Even now, the moon is slowly moving away, a few centimeters each year, almost too small to notice, yet relentless across geological time. This gradual drift reveals an ongoing exchange of energy between Earth's rotation and the moon's orbit. The tide's slow Earth spins slightly, transferring momentum outward. Over billions of years, days on Earth have grown longer. The moon has moved farther. This chapter moves through that slow separation, a quiet cosmic stretching between two bodies that once formed much closer together, a partnership slowly loosening, but never quite breaking, the pale witness of everything that followed. In the end, the moon becomes something more than an object in the sky. And it becomes a witness. It watched continents form, watched oceans gather their salt, watched life crawl from water into sunlight, and long after humanity appeared, the moon remained unchanged above it all. This final chapter drifts into the quiet philosophical weight of the moon's presence, a celestial fossil that holds clues to the earliest days of Earth, and perhaps to the fragile balance that allowed life to flourish. The story circles back to the original question. What if the moon is not merely a companion? What if it is a memory, a scar of planetary birth, a silent partner in the story of life, or perhaps something even stranger, still? A reminder that the universe often shapes miracles from catastrophe. If this feels right, the story will now begin its slow descent into the first chapter. Oh, the silent beginning of a second world. The first sky was not quiet. It glowed, not with the soft patience of modern stars, but with the restless brightness of a newborn system still learning how to breathe. Dust moved everywhere. Invisible currents of gravity stirred clouds of stone and metal like slow winds passing through an endless desert of fragments. The sun had only recently awakened from its long gestation within a collapsing nebula. Around it, the leftovers of that birth drifted in wide spirals. Grains of silicate dust, ice older than the star itself, shards of iron, broken pieces of worlds that had never quite finished becoming whole. Time did not move quickly in that era. It thickened. Millions of years passed the way snow settles across a silent valley, quietly layering one moment upon another, and until the past itself became difficult to measure. Within that haze of drifting matter, gravity practiced its quiet craft. 2 particles collided, then 4, then 100. Small stones formed where dust once wandered freely. Pebbles gathered into larger shapes into wandering bodies whose paths slowly curved under the steady persuasion of mass. Nothing hurried. The universe rarely does. One fragment brushed against another and remained, Another passed close enough for gravity to tug gently at its motion. A slow gathering began, a patient congregation of matter assembling itself without intention, without awareness, guided only by the ancient language written into the fabric of space. Mass attracts mass. Stone calls to stone. And so the earliest bones of planets began to take shape. They were not yet the quiet worlds known today. They were molten things, glowing spheres of half-formed geology, their surfaces constantly torn open by new collisions. Mountains rose and vanished in hours. Lava seas rippled beneath atmospheres made of vaporized rock. The solar system was young, and youth is rarely gentle. Among these forming bodies drifted one sphere that would eventually become Earth. But at first it was simply another restless embryo of rock orbiting the young sun. Its surface burned. Rivers of magma folded over one another, like slow red tides beneath a sky crowded with debris. Impacts arrived often, each one reshaping the surface in sudden flashes of white heat. Some were small enough to vanish without memory, others carved wounds that would glow for centuries. The young planet was still gathering itself. Its iron sank toward its center, pulled downward through molten layers until a dense metallic core formed deep within. Lighter minerals floated upward, forming a thick mantle that churned slowly beneath the crust like the breathing of something ancient and unseen. But the crust itself was fragile. It cracked easily, melted easily, reformed again and again under the endless bombardment of space. Everywhere above the molten world, fragments continued to drift. Some were no larger than mountains, others rivaled the planet itself. The early solar system was crowded with unfinished worlds, each moving along its orbit like a slow thought circling the sun. Paths crossed often. Gravity bent trajectories in subtle ways that sometimes took millions of years to reveal their consequences, and somewhere beyond Earth's orbit, another body had been forming quietly. It did not yet have a name. It had no atmosphere, no ocean, no mountain ranges shaped by patient erosion. It was simply another planetary embryo, a sphere of rock perhaps the size of Mars, assembled from the same drifting materials that built Earth itself. Its path through space was stable for a time. Then slowly, gravity altered its future. The movements were almost imperceptible at first, a slight shift into orbit caused by the distant pull of Jupiter, a passing interaction with another growing planet. Each gravitational whisper nudged the body onto a slightly different trajectory around the sun, not immediately dangerous. Not yet. But the solar system remembers every motion. Orbits are patient storytellers. They carry the consequences of small changes across immense spans of time until eventually those consequences arrive. And so the wandering world began drifting closer to the path of the young Earth. Millions of years passed before their orbits truly intersected. Even then, the meeting was not immediate. Both bodies continued circling the sun in their vast elliptical journeys, sometimes near, sometimes far. The distance between them shrank slowly. Gravity noticed. The pull between two masses grows stronger as they approach one another. Not suddenly, but with the steady insistence of a tide rising beneath a quiet shore. Earth felt it first as a subtle disturbance in the sky. A new object glimmered faintly among the drifting debris, a dark silhouette moving slowly against the distant stars. At first it passed far away, and a quiet neighbour in a crowded system, but each orbit brought the two worlds closer, closer, closer still. By then the young Earth was no longer a smooth sphere of molten rock. It had begun cooling slightly. Islands of hardened crust floated upon the deeper magma seas like fragile rafts drifting atop a glowing ocean, yet the surface remained unstable. Heat from the planet's formation still radiated outward through volcanic eruptions that stitched fire across the darkening crust. Steam gathered above these eruptions, forming a primitive atmosphere of thick clouds and volcanic gases. Lightning flashed constantly through those clouds. Beneath them, the surface glowed. And somewhere above that restless world, the approaching body continued its silent migration through space. It did not hurry. Gravity never does. The two worlds circled the sun again and again, their paths gradually intertwining like threads drawn slowly together by invisible hands. With each passing orbit, their gravitational influence grew stronger. Tides began to form inside the molten Earth itself, not water tides, for oceans had not yet fully gathered, but tides within the mantle. Vast bulges of molten rock rose and fell beneath the surface as the approaching body tugged gently at the planet's interior. Stone remembers gravity. even when it moved slowly. The sky above the young Earth changed as the wanderer grew larger. What once appeared as a distant point of darkness slowly expanded into a visible world drifting among the stars. Its surface reflected faint sunlight, a dull, reddish glow across battered rock and deep impact basins. And two planets were approaching one another. Neither could turn away, because in the language of celestial motion, some encounters are written long before they occur. Their paths had already been chosen by the slow mathematics of gravity and time. Every orbit brought them nearer to the moment when those paths would finally intersect. Yet even now, as the two bodies moved toward their inevitable meeting, the solar system remained strangely quiet. No sound travelled through the vacuum between them. Only motion, only mass, only the silent conversation between two worlds drawing closer across millions of years. And far in the future, when oceans would rise and forests would breathe beneath calmer skies, the pale moon would hang above the Earth like a fossil of that ancient moment. But the moon did not yet exist, not yet. Because first, two planets would have to collide. The sky continued its patient turning. Above the molten Earth, stars drifted slowly as the young planet followed its path around the sun. Nothing in the heavens appeared hurried. The distant lights held their ancient positions. Dust moved like faint smoke between the worlds. Yet something within the sky had changed. The wandering body had grown large enough to dominate the horizon when it rose. It no longer resembled a distant fragment of stone. Its presence now carried weight, a second world hanging within the dark, slowly crossing the star-filled canopy above the glowing surface. Its name would come much later, long after oceans learned the language of tides, long after human voices learned to look upward and wonder. But in those early ages, it was simply another mass moving through space, a sphere of iron and rock shaped by the same slow violence that had formed Earth itself. Its surface bore the scars of endless collisions, craters layered upon craters, each one a fossil of ancient impacts that had shaped the young solar system. Across those wounds stretched vast plains of cooling lava, hardened long ago beneath a sky that had never known clouds. The body carried its own memory of creation, and it was coming closer. Each orbit around the sun shortened the distance between the two worlds. The paths that once passed comfortably apart now intersected more tightly. Gravity began drawing their trajectories inward, weaving their motions into something more intimate. Earth felt the approach first beneath its surface, deep within the molten mantle. The tides of stone grew stronger. The gravitational pull of the wandering body lifted entire regions of magma upward before allowing them to settle again. The crust above these tides fractured under the strain, releasing new rivers of fire that spilled across the planet's scarred skin. Volcanoes erupted endlessly. Ash rose into the thick young atmosphere, dimming the light of the sun behind heavy clouds of gas and vaporized rock. Lightning threaded through those clouds like veins of white fire, illuminating a world still unfinished. Above it all, the approaching body continued drifting nearer. Its gravity answered Earth's pull with equal patience. The two spheres had begun a conversation written entirely in mass. No words, no sound, only force. When two large bodies move close enough, gravity does not merely pull them together. Yet it reshapes their interiors. Their crusts stretch subtly under tidal strain. Their orbits bend, their rotations begin to change. These influences arrive slowly, but they arrive inevitably. The approaching world tugged gently at Earth's mantle, and Earth answered with its own pull in return. Both bodies shifted slightly within their paths around the sun, their motions adjusting in response to the invisible tension growing between them. Millions of years had passed since their first distant crossing. Now the distance between them was shrinking with every orbit. If an observer had existed above the solar system, the scene might have resembled two drifting embers circling the same fire, their paths gradually spiraling inward until the space between them grew dangerously thin. But there were no observers then, and only gravity keeping its quiet promises. On the surface of Earth, the young crust continued breaking and reforming under the stress of internal heat and cosmic bombardment. Meteorites arrived daily, some small enough to vanish in flashes of molten stone, others large enough to carve new basins across the unstable surface. Each impact added fresh heat to the already restless planet. The atmosphere thickened with vaporized minerals and volcanic gases. Water existed only as steam in those early ages, suspended within dense clouds that wrapped the planet in a dim orange haze. Through that haze, the approaching world appeared enormous now, a dark sphere rising above the glowing horizon. Its motion across the sky was slow but undeniable. Over weeks and months it drifted among the stars, growing gradually larger as the two bodies followed their intersecting orbits around the Sun. The gravitational conversation deepened. Earth's rotation began to wobble slightly under the influence of the approaching mass. The planet's axis shifted by small degrees, its spin adjusting to the growing pull above. Inside the mantle, the tidal forces intensified. Great currents of molten rock surged beneath the crust, lifting entire regions upward, before letting them sink again like slow waves moving through the planet's interior. The surface cracked under that pressure. Long fractures opened across the young continents, lava flooded upward through those wounds, spilling across the darkening crust in glowing rivers that cooled slowly beneath the heavy clouds. It was a world in constant motion, nothing yet stable, nothing yet settled. And above that unstable landscape, the wandering body loomed closer with every passing orbit. Its surface reflected faint sunlight through the thick atmospheric haze, appearing as a dull red glow in the sky. Craters and ridges became visible along its curved edge. Shadows moved slowly across its battered terrain as it rotated through space. Two planets were now close enough to recognize one another's gravity fully. Their paths had begun to intertwine. At first, the encounter seemed as though it might remain a near miss. The approaching body passed along Earth's outer gravitational boundary during one orbit, drifting past at a distance that would have allowed both worlds to continue their journeys unchanged. But the solar system is rarely so forgiving, and a slight alteration in velocity during that passage, perhaps the lingering influence of another planet far away, nudged the wandering body just enough to reshape the future. Its orbit shifted, not dramatically, only slightly. But in celestial mechanics, slight changes echo loudly across time. When the two worlds approached again during the next orbit around the Sun, their paths crossed more closely than before. The gravitational pull between them surged. Earth's mantle heaved beneath the tidal strain. Volcanoes erupted in long chains across the unstable crust, filling the thick atmosphere with new clouds of ash and vapor. The sky darkened further. Lightning flashed endlessly through the roiling gases above, and the approaching body now filled a massive portion of the horizon whenever it rose. And its gravity tugged at Earth's oceans of molten rock. Entire bulges of magma lifted toward the sky-facing hemisphere before settling again as the body drifted across the heavens. The planet was beginning to stretch. Stone can bend when gravity insists. Within the approaching world, similar tides of rock rippled beneath its own fractured crust. The two bodies were already influencing one another long before contact would occur. Their gravitational fields had become entangled. Each movement of one body altered the motion of the other. Their paths tightened, closer now than ever before. The distance between them had shrunk to a scale that would one day seem unimaginable. Only a few planetary diameters separating two worlds that had once orbited the Sun independently. The sky above Earth held a second horizon, and a looming sphere that rose slowly through the volcanic haze. A world approaching its final moment as an independent planet, yet the collision had not happened yet. The two bodies continued circling one another within the broader orbit around the Sun, their gravitational dance growing more unstable with every passing revolution. The mathematics of their motion was no longer balanced. Eventually, gravity would demand resolution. Eventually, the paths of the two worlds would converge at a single moment written millions of years earlier in the silent equations of celestial motion. But even now, as the distance between them shrank toward inevitability, the universe remained quiet. No warning, no thunder, only the slow drawing together of two masses across the patient fabric of space. And somewhere within that quiet convergence waited an event that would reshape the Earth forever, because when the two worlds finally met, stone would remember, and from the ashes of that meeting something new would rise into the sky. Not immediately, not quickly, but slowly, the way moons are born. The final approach unfolded without urgency. Space rarely rushes toward its turning points. Even moments that reshape entire planets arrive through patient motion, through quiet adjustments of trajectory that accumulate across ages until suddenly the future cannot turn aside. The two worlds continued circling the Sun. Earth spun beneath its heavy clouds of ash and vapor. The wandering planet drifted through the dark, its battered surface reflecting faint light across the widening sky, and between them stretched a narrowing gulf of emptiness. Gravity had already begun weaving their motions together. Each pass brought them closer than the last. Their paths no longer belonged solely to the sun, now they belonged partly to one another. The approaching body did not fall straight toward Earth. Instead, it curved inward through space, its orbit bending gradually under the growing pull of the larger world ahead, a spiral without hurry. Distance shrank, first by thousands of kilometers, then hundreds. The sky above the young Earth changed again. Where once the wandering world had appeared as a distant sphere drifting among stars, it now dominated the heavens. Half the sky glowed with its presence. Its cratered plains and towering ridges became visible through the thinning atmosphere, lit faintly by sunlight filtering through clouds of volcanic gas. The horizon held a second horizon, two planets looking at one another across a fragile gap of vacuum. Inside Earth, the tidal forces had grown immense. Entire regions of the mantle bulged upward beneath the surface. The crust fractured under the strain, releasing endless fountains of lava that spread across the planet like glowing scars. The ground itself seemed to breathe, rising, settling, rising again, stone bending slowly beneath gravity's patient hands. Within the approaching body, similar forces stirred its interior. Its crust trembled under tidal strain, ancient fractures widening as molten rock pushed upward from deeper layers. New eruptions carved bright streaks across its scarred terrain, two worlds reshaping one another even before their surfaces met. The distance between them had now grown small enough that loose fragments of rock began drifting between their gravitational fields. Small asteroids and debris from earlier collisions were pulled away from their old orbits, captured briefly by the competing gravity wells of the two massive bodies. Some fragments spiraled toward Earth, others toward the approaching world. Still others drifted endlessly between them, caught in a delicate balance of forces that would soon collapse. Above the volcanic haze, the second planet moved slowly across the sky. Days passed, weeks. Each rotation of Earth revealed the growing presence of the approaching body from a slightly different angle. Its curved horizon stretched wider each time it rose, its surface detail sharpening as distance continued to shrink. The sky no longer held the calm patterns of stars, it held a world. The gravitational bond between the two spheres intensified further. Their mutual pull altered the speed of their rotations. Earth's spin slowed slightly under the tidal strain, while the approaching body's own rotation shifted subtly as its interior flexed beneath the growing gravitational tension. Their motions had become intertwined. Neither could escape the encounter now. The final approach unfolded across only a few remaining orbits around the Sun. By then the paths of the two worlds had curved so tightly that they no longer followed separate trajectories. Instead, they had begun circling one another while still drifting together through space. A temporary system of two planets caught in the same gravitational embrace, but the dance was unstable. An energy flowed through their interaction in complex ways. Tidal friction heating their interiors, gravitational torques reshaping their rotations. Each orbit tightened the bond further, drawing them closer toward the inevitable point where their surfaces would meet. If the meeting had occurred gently, the two worlds might have merged quietly into a larger planet. But celestial encounters are rarely so soft. The approaching body moved through space with enormous velocity relative to Earth. Even as gravity pulled them together, the momentum of its orbit carried it sideways across the planet's path. The collision would not be direct, it would be glancing, and that glancing impact would change everything. As the final hours of the approach unfolded, the sky above Earth filled almost entirely with the looming fissures of the approaching world. Its mountains stretched across the heavens like dark continents suspended above the clouds. Vast craters opened like silent eyes in the rock. Light from the young sun slid across those landscapes, casting long shadows into the depths of ancient impact basins. The two spheres were now separated by only a few thousand kilometers. For planets, this is nearly touching. Inside Earth, the tidal bulges had grown colossal. Entire sections of the mantle rose toward the approaching body, stretching the crust upward in vast domes of fractured rock. Lava surged through these fractures in rivers that glowed beneath the dim sky. The atmosphere churned violently under the strain of shifting gravity. Winds howled through the thick clouds, and carrying ash and vapor across the planet in endless spirals. Above those clouds, the second world continued its descent, closer, closer still. The final moment approached slowly enough that if eyes had existed to witness it, the collision might have appeared almost graceful. The approaching body slid across Earth's horizon, its curved edge, descending toward the planet's glowing surface. Gravity accelerated the motion further as the last distance vanished. Then quietly, almost gently at first, the surfaces touched. The first contact occurred high above Earth's crust, where the outer edges of the two planetary atmospheres mingled briefly in a turbulent storm of vaporized gases. Moments later, the solid crusts met. Stone struck stone. The energy released in that instant surpassed anything the planet had ever known. And not an explosion in the ordinary sense, but a transformation. The approaching world slammed into Earth at an oblique angle, its immense mass tearing across the planet's outer layers like a colossal blade passing through molten rock. Mountains vanished instantly. Entire regions of crust liquefied under the unimaginable heat of impact. Shockwaves rippled through the planet's interior, shaking the mantle and core with forces that would echo for centuries. The surface of Earth opened. Vast plumes of molten rock erupted upward from the collision zone, flinging fragments of both worlds high into space. Entire sections of the crust were blasted outward beyond the planet's gravitational grasp. The sky itself filled with fire. But even that fire made no sound in the vacuum above the atmosphere. Only motion, only heat, and only the silent scattering of planetary debris across the dark. The smaller world did not survive the encounter intact. Much of its mass merged with the one of Earth's mantle during the impact, its iron sinking slowly toward the growing core of the larger planet. But enormous quantities of material were thrown outward into orbit. Fragments of crust, rivers of molten stone, clouds of vaporized rock expanding outward from the collision like a slow-blooming flower of fire. The debris did not escape entirely. Earth's gravity reached outward and gathered much of the shattered material into a vast disk encircling the wounded planet. A ring of fire and stone, molten fragments circling silently above the glowing surface below. The collision itself lasted only hours. Its consequences would unfold for millions of years. Because from that ring of broken worlds, something new would begin to gather. Slowly, patiently, the way gravity always gathers its scattered dust. And in the dark sky above the wounded Earth, the earliest fragments of the future moon had already begun their quiet orbit. After the collision, the sky did not return to silence. It glowed. Above the wounded Earth, the darkness of space had filled with a vast halo of drifting fire. Fragments of both worlds circled the planet in long arcs of molten stone and cooling ash. What had once been continents, mountains, and deep layers of planetary crust now existed as scattered debris suspended within Earth's gravity. The impact had ended quickly, but its aftermath stretched outward across time like ripples moving slowly across a dark sea. For a while, the planet itself seemed barely recognizable. The surface had melted into a global ocean of magma, its brightness casting a dull orange glow into the thick atmosphere above. Clouds of vaporized rock wrapped the planet in a dense shroud, turning the sky into a dim, copper-coloured haze through which the sun appeared only as a blurred ember. Yet above that haze, something extraordinary had begun to form. The debris from the collision did not scatter randomly into space. Earth's gravity held much of it close, gathering the fragments into a broad disk encircling the planet. Within that disk, pieces of shattered crust and mantle drifted together like ash swirling within a quiet current. Some fragments were small, no larger than stones. Others were the size of mountains. Many still glowed faintly with heat, their surfaces slowly cooling as they traced endless paths around the planet that had birthed them. From the ground below, the sky would have appeared filled with a ring of fire, a luminous band stretching across the heavens where molten fragments caught the light of the distant sun. Yet even within that chaotic cloud, gravity continued its quiet work. Every fragment tugged gently upon every other. These pulls were small, almost imperceptible. But over time they changed everything. Particles drifting close together collided softly, merging into larger bodies. Other fragments brushed past one another and separated again, their paths altered slightly by each encounter. Some were drawn inward toward the glowing planet below, falling back through the thick atmosphere to vanish once more into the molten surface. But many remained suspended within the disk, and slowly, almost invisibly, the scattered fragments began to gather. The process carried no urgency. Thousands of years passed, then tens of thousands. Within the ring of debris, certain regions grew denser than others. There, gravity strengthened its influence, drawing nearby fragments inward. Small clusters of rock formed, drifting through the disk like seeds carried by a quiet wind. Each cluster grew gradually as more material joined it. Stone calling to stone again, the language of gravity repeating its ancient sentence. At first, these bodies remained small, irregular shapes tumbling slowly through the debris field as they collected additional fragments. But the larger they became, the stronger their gravitational pull grew, and so the gathering accelerated. The clusters merged with other clusters. Fragments collided and stuck together rather than drifting apart. Molten rock cooled and hardened into new crust. Within the swirling disk above Earth, a handful of growing bodies began to dominate the surrounding space. Their gravity cleared small regions within the debris field, drawing nearby fragments toward them like quiet magnets pulling iron dust. The sky above the wounded planet had become a workshop of worlds. Some of these growing bodies eventually fell back toward Earth, pulled inward by the lingering turbulence of the collision. Their fiery descent added fresh waves of molten stone to the planet's glowing surface, but one cluster drifted outwards slightly beyond the others. There, the balance of forces allowed it to remain stable, and it continued gathering fragments from the surrounding disk, growing steadily larger as time passed. Each new collision added more mass to its body, shaping its form gradually into something rounder, smoother. A sphere was being born, not suddenly, not in a moment of fire, but through the patient accumulation of countless fragments of a broken world. For many thousands of years, the growing sphere remained surrounded by the remaining debris of the disk. Smaller fragments continued striking its surface, leaving scars across the cooling crust. Each impact added another layer to its story. Its surface glowed at first with the lingering heat of formation. Molten seas spread across its young landscape. Rivers of magma filled deep basins carved by incoming fragments. Slowly, as time stretched onward, that molten ocean cooled, and a crust formed. Beneath that crust, the interior remained warm and restless, still remembering the violence of the collision that had created it. But the shape had stabilized. The growing sphere now possessed enough gravity to hold itself together fully. Its orbit around Earth had settled into a predictable path, a slow, steady circle within the dark. The debris disk that had once filled the sky began to thin. Much of its material had already joined the new body forming beyond it. What remained gradually fell either toward Earth or toward the growing sphere itself, adding the final fragments needed to complete its shape. Millions of years continued to pass. The surface of the newborn world cooled further. Its magma oceans solidified into vast plains of dark volcanic rock. Impact scars remained etched across the landscape, preserved within a crust that would change very little for the rest of cosmic history. Unlike Earth, this smaller world lacked the internal heat required to drive restless tectonic motion. Its surface hardened into stillness. The scars of its youth would remain visible forever. Below it, the Earth slowly healed from the ancient collision. Its own magma ocean cooled gradually beneath the thick atmosphere. Water vapor condensed into the first rains, falling endlessly for centuries as the early oceans began gathering within the planet's basins. Clouds thinned. The sky darkened into something closer to the night that would one day be familiar. And there, rising above the quieting horizon, hung the new world that had formed from the ashes of catastrophe. Larger than the moon appears today, closer too, its presence dominated the sky, and a massive sphere of pale rock circling slowly above the recovering planet. It had been born from the collision of two worlds, a child of broken stone, a witness to the earliest violence of Earth's creation, and though its surface would grow quiet and cold, its gravity would continue whispering across the oceans below for billions of years to come. The tides had not yet begun, but the rhythm that would shape them was already written into the sky, because the newborn moon had taken its place beside Earth, and their long companionship had just begun. But what formed in fire and broken gravity still carried secrets inside its stone, secrets that would linger across ages, because the moon was not merely debris gathered into a sphere, it was memory, and memory, even in stone, does not fade easily. And time settled over the newborn moon the way dust settles across abandoned ground, slowly, quietly, without announcement. The fiery ring that once surrounded Earth had almost entirely vanished. Most of its fragments had already fallen, either returning to the wounded planet below or joining the growing body that now circled it. What remained were only scattered grains of rock drifting quietly through space. Above the slowly cooling Earth, the moon moved through its orbit like a pale ember, still remembering the furnace of its birth. It was closer then, much closer. Where the moon today appears as a small silver coin drifting through the night sky, the young moon filled enormous stretches of the heavens. Its disk rose slowly above the horizon, like another world leaning toward Earth, and its cratered plains visible even through the lingering haze of the early atmosphere. The distance between them was only a fraction of what it would become in the far future. Two worlds sharing the same gravity, two remnants of a forgotten collision bound together in patient orbit. On Earth, the planet continued its slow recovery. The magma ocean that had once wrapped the surface gradually cooled beneath the thick shroud of volcanic gases. Crust formed again across the planet's skin, fragile at first, breaking often beneath the restless movements of the mantle below. But the surface was no longer entirely molten. Islands of hardened rock spread slowly across the glowing seas. Above those islands, the sky began its long transformation. Steam condensed, rain began to fall. At first it arrived as violent storms, torrents of water drawn from the thick atmosphere that had formed during the planet's early volcanic ages. The rain fell endlessly, hissing, as it struck the still warm crust, pooling slowly within lower basins that would one day become oceans. Water gathered, stone cooled, and above the forming seas, the young moon watched. Its presence was not passive. Gravity reached outward from the moon toward the planet below, tugging gently upon the growing oceans. Even before the waters had fully settled into their basins, the subtle pull of the moon had begun to shape their motion. The earliest tides were enormous. The moon's close orbit amplified its gravitational influence, lifting the young oceans into great bulges that rose and fell across the planet's surface as Earth rotated beneath them. And entire seas shifted slowly towards the moon before drifting back again as the planet turned. Water moved, stone listened. Because gravity speaks even to oceans. Along the earliest shorelines, these tides carved shallow pools that filled and emptied under the slow rhythm of the moon's pull. Minerals dissolved within the water. Chemical reactions unfolded quietly within those shifting basins. The Earth was not yet alive, but the stage was quietly assembling itself. Above the oceans, the moon continued circling in patient silence. Its surface had cooled completely now. The molten seas that once glowed across its young landscape had hardened into vast plains of dark volcanic rock. Impact scars remained frozen across the crust, craters that would never erode away, preserved in the airless and stillness of the lunar surface. Unlike us Earth, the moon had no atmosphere to soften its past, no wind, no rain, no rivers to carry away its scars. Every wound it received would remain etched into stone. Across its ancient plains lay the memory of the collision that had created it, fragments of Earth's mantle mixed with the remnants of the destroyed wandering world, a fossil of violence orbiting quietly above the recovering planet. And yet the moon's presence was already shaping Earth's future. The tides it created stirred the young oceans endlessly. Water rose and fell across the shores, mixing minerals and molecules that drifted within the seas. Shorelines flooded and retreated again beneath the slow breathing of gravity. The rhythm repeated, again and again. Days passed, years passed, millions of years passed. Earth continued cooling, its crust thickened. The continents began their earliest slow movements across the surface, drifting atop the mantle like immense rafts carried by currents deep below. Above it all, the moon remained constant. Its orbit stabilized gradually as the debris of the ancient collision finished settling. The gravitational relationship between the two bodies deepened into something stable, a quiet balance of motion that would persist for billions of years. But even within that stability, change continued. Earth rotated quickly in those early ages. A full day lasted only a handful of hours as the planet spun rapidly beneath its thickening atmosphere. The moon's gravity tugged constantly at Earth's oceans, raising tides that moved across the surface with powerful momentum. Each rising tide pulled slightly against Earth's rotation, and each falling tide released that tension again. The effect was small, almost invisible, but time magnifies even the smallest forces. Over millions of years, the tidal friction between the oceans and the planet's spinning crust began to slow Earth's rotation. The days lengthened gradually as energy transferred outward into the moon's orbit. The moon responded by drifting slightly farther away, not suddenly, only by the width of a fingernail each year. Yet across the immense patience of geological time, even such tiny motions accumulate into vast distances. The two worlds were beginning their long, slow separation, still bound, still companions, but gradually drifting apart. The moon moved outward through the sky by increments too small to notice within a single lifetime. Its orbit widened gently, carrying it farther from the planet that had once been its molten cradle. The tide softened, the days lengthened, and still the moon watched. Above the growing oceans, above the shifting continents, above the first quiet stirrings of chemistry that would one day awaken into life. Its pale surface reflected sunlight across the young planet's nights, casting a dim silver glow upon waters that had only recently gathered. A companion born from catastrophe, a silent archivist of Earth's earliest memories, and though the violence that created it had faded into the deep past, the moon continued carrying those ancient secrets within its stone. Because the story of the moon was not finished, not even close. The collision had created it, gravity had shaped it. But something else had begun to unfold in the quiet relationship between Earth and its pale companion. A rhythm, a balance, a slow conversation between water, stone and orbit that would guide the future of life itself, and the tides, still young and restless, were only beginning to remember their language. The oceans deepened. Rain had fallen for ages by then, not in gentle showers, but in vast planetary storms that circled the globe again and again. Water that had once drifted as vapour through the thick atmosphere now gathered into basins carved by ancient impacts and shifting crust. Seas expanded slowly. Low regions filled first. Then deeper basins welcomed the weight of accumulating water until immense oceans stretched across much of the planet's surface. And through it all the moon continued its quiet watch above. And its pale light moved across the growing seas like a memory passing over dark glass. Though the moon itself emitted no light, its borrowed glow from the distant sun became the first lantern of Earth's night. The surface of the young oceans answered the moon's gravity faithfully. Water rose toward the sky-facing side of the planet, forming vast tidal bulges that followed the moon's slow movement overhead. As Earth rotated beneath that pull, coastlines experienced the rhythmic advance and retreat of the sea. In those early ages, the tides were immense. The moon's orbit still lay close to the Earth compared with the distances of the future. Its gravitational voice spoke loudly to the oceans. Entire shorelines vanished beneath advancing water before returning again as the tides withdrew. The planet had begun to breathe, rise, fall. Rise again. The tides became the earliest rhythm written across Earth's surface, a quiet pulse repeating itself thousands of times across each turning of the planet. And within those shifting margins between land and sea, something subtle unfolded. The tidal pools that formed along early coastlines became small laboratories of chemistry. Minerals dissolved into the water. Heat from the still warm crust seeped upward through cracks in the ocean floor. Molecules drifted together, separated, and recombined endlessly beneath the gentle agitation of the tides. The moon did not know this. The moon simply moved through its orbit. But gravity has consequences that stretch far beyond intention. Each tidal cycle stirred the young oceans like a slow spoon, turning through an enormous bowl. Elements mixed and energy moved, and patterns began to appear in places where water lingered long enough for chemistry to experiment with itself. The world remained silent. Life had not yet arrived, but the conditions that might one day welcome it were slowly assembling beneath the rhythm of lunar gravity. Above the oceans, the moon's own surface remained unchanged. Its landscape had already settled into the stillness that would define it for billions of years. Without air or water, the moon possessed no winds to shape its plains, no rivers to carve its valleys. Every crater remained exactly as it had formed, each scar preserved within stone like a fossil of ancient violence. And across those cratered plains lay vast fields of dark volcanic rock, the frozen remains of magma that had once surged across the moon's surface while its interior still held heat from its violent birth. That heat faded slowly over time. The moon's small size allowed its interior to cool faster than Earth's. The molten currents that once stirred beneath its crust gradually stilled. Volcanoes that had once poured lava across its plains fell quiet. The moon hardened. It became a fossil world. Yet its stillness was deceptive. Though the moon's surface changed little, its orbit continued evolving quietly through the invisible exchange of energy between it and Earth. Each tidal cycle on Earth transferred a tiny amount of rotational energy from the spinning planet into the moon's orbit. The effect was subtle, almost immeasurable within a single human lifetime. But over millions of years, the consequence became clear. The moon drifted outward, a few centimeters each year, slow enough to seem motionless, yet persistent enough to carry the moon far from its birthplace across geological ages. The tides responded. As the moon moved farther away, its gravitational pull upon the oceans softened slightly. The enormous tidal surges of Earth's youth gradually diminished into more moderate rhythms. The ocean still rose, still fell, but their breath grew calmer. Earth itself changed under this slow influence. The planet's rapid early rotation slowed as the tides continued pulling gently against the spinning crust. Days lengthened little by little, stretching the planet's rhythm across longer hours. Her time itself seemed to widen. The sky changed with it. Longer nights gave the moon more time to cross the heavens. Its pale arc moved slowly above continents that were still forming beneath the restless dance of tectonic plates. Mountains rose and fell across those drifting continents. Seas opened and closed as the crust reshaped itself across the ages. Above it all, the moon continued circling quietly, unchanged, unhurried, carrying the silent memory of the ancient collision that had given it birth. The Earth moved. The moon remembered. Across billions of years that companionship endured. Forests would one day grow across the continents. Creatures would walk beneath the sky. Eyes would lift upward in wonder at the pale disk drifting through the night. But the moon had already witnessed the earliest chapters of Earth's story long before those eyes existed. It had watched the oceans gather, watched the crust settle, watched the tides carve their slow rhythm into the edges of the land, and it would continue watching. Because the relationship between Earth and the moon was no longer simply the aftermath of a collision. It had become something deeper, a gravitational conversation that would persist for billions of years, a quiet partnership between two worlds. Yet even within that ancient companionship, mysteries remained hidden inside the moon's silent stone. Questions that would linger across ages. Questions about why the moon's chemistry resembles Earth's mantle so closely, why its orbit stabilizes Earth's tilt so precisely, but why its far side holds a different story than the face that gazes forever toward the planet below. The moon had formed from catastrophe, but its presence had quietly shaped the future of the world beneath it. A scar that became a guide, a fragment of violence that helped create stability. And though it drifted slowly away with each passing year, the moon remained bound to Earth by the patient threads of gravity, two worlds sharing a history written in molten rock and silent orbit. The beginning had been violent, but what followed was something gentler, a rhythm, a balance, a long companionship unfolding across time so vast that even mountains would forget their own beginnings. Yet the moon still held secrets beyond its quiet surface, secrets hidden on the side that Earth could never see, and a hemisphere that had waited in darkness for billions of years, a face that would remain unknown until the age when small machines would finally circle the moon and glimpse what had been hidden since the earliest days of the solar system, because the moon, though silent, had never revealed all of its story. Some memories prefer the dark. Ashes in the orbit of memory. Long before the oceans learned their rhythm beneath the moon, the sky had been filled with remnants, not stars, not clouds, but fragments, stone that once belonged to two worlds drifting together in a slow halo around the wounded Earth. The collision had passed quickly, a single glancing moment in the long arithmetic of the cosmos, yet its consequences stretched outward across time, leaving behind a sky crowded with broken geology. Above the molten planet, had the debris disk turned silently. Each fragment carried memory inside it, pieces of Earth's mantle, pieces of the wandering world that had crossed its path too closely. Some fragments glowed faintly with the lingering heat of their violent birth. Others had already cooled into jagged silhouettes tumbling slowly through the darkness. The disk stretched thousands of kilometers outward from the planet, a wide, luminous ring where molten rock caught the distant sunlight. From the surface of Earth, had the atmosphere been clear enough, the sight might have resembled a second horizon made entirely of fire. But the young planet remained wrapped in thick clouds of vapor and ash. The sky below the debris disk glowed dimly through layers of steam and volcanic gas. The world was still healing. Above those clouds, the fragments drifted in patient motion. Gravity moved among them like a quiet shepherd. Every particle tugged upon its neighbours. Every passing fragment altered the path of another by the smallest degree. Most encounters were gentle, brief touches of stone against stone before the fragments continued their separate journeys. But some collisions ended differently. Two fragments would meet and remain together. Their combined mass grew slightly larger. Their gravity strengthened. And suddenly the space around them began to change. Nearby particles felt the pull and curved inward. Another collision followed. Then another. Within the wide disk circling Earth, clusters of rock began forming slowly, like islands appearing within an endless sea of drifting debris. Time stretched forward. Thousands of years slipped past unnoticed. The debris disk slowly thickened in certain regions where gravity gathered fragments more efficiently. Within those dense regions, collisions became more frequent. The growing clusters of rock began pulling material inward from their surroundings. A slow architecture of worlds was beginning again. But unlike the early days of the solar system, this gathering occurred within the gravitational shadow of Earth itself. The planet below held the disk in its grasp. Its gravity prevented most fragments from escaping outward into space. Instead, they continued circling within the wide ring, their paths bending and weaving under the steady pull of the massive world beneath them. Yet the disk could not remain stable forever. Motion within it carried energy. Fragments crossed one another's paths again and again, and exchanging momentum during collisions. Some pieces fell inward toward Earth, spiraling down through the atmosphere to vanish within the molten surface. Others drifted outward beyond the densest region of the disk. There, a subtle boundary existed, a quiet threshold in space where gravity behaved differently. Close to Earth, tidal forces pulled strongly upon the drifting fragments. These forces could tear loosely bound clusters apart before they had time to fully assemble into larger bodies. But beyond a certain distance, those tidal forces weakened, and there, in that calmer region, gravity was finally free to finish what it had begun. Clusters that wandered beyond that invisible boundary found themselves able to grow without disruption. Fragments collided and remained together. Mass accumulated. The clusters grew rounder, heavier, more confident in their hold upon the surrounding debris. One cluster in particular drifted outward just far enough to cross that quiet threshold. Its growth accelerated. Fragments drawn toward it collided gently with its surface, adding new layers of stone to its body. Heat from these impacts briefly melted the outer crust, creating pools of molten rock that cooled again under the cold gaze of space. The shape became more spherical, more stable, more permanent. A new world was gathering itself from the scattered ashes of two older ones. For thousands of years, the growing body remained surrounded by smaller fragments still drifting through the thinning disk. Some struck its surface, carving craters into the young crust. Others were captured briefly by its gravity before spiraling inward to join its mass. Slowly, the debris disk began to fade. Its material had found a destination, either returning to Earth below or assembling into the growing sphere that now circled quietly above the wounded planet. Inside the newborn body, heat lingered from the violence of its formation. Molten currents moved beneath the crust, shifting slowly as gravity pulled heavier materials toward the center. But the interior would never remain active for long. The body was too small to sustain the deep, restless motion that drove Earth's geology. Its heat would fade quickly across cosmic time, leaving behind a quiet world whose surface would change very little across billions of years. Yet in those earliest ages, the young sphere still glowed faintly. Its crust cracked and shifted as the interior cooled. Volcanic eruptions spilled dark rivers of lava across the plains, filling ancient impact basins with smooth seas of basalt. These frozen seas would one day appear to distant human eyes as dark shapes across the moon's face. The Moriah, silent plains formed during the final whispers of lunar volcanism. But that future still waited billions of years ahead. For now, the young moon continued gathering the last remnants of the debris disk. The sky around Earth slowly cleared. Fragments that once filled the heavens dwindled to scattered grains drifting through space. The great ring of broken worlds had completed its transformation. From catastrophe had emerged a companion, a quiet sphere orbiting the recovering planet below. Yet something curious had already begun to shape the relationship between these two bodies. Though the moon's orbit was not perfectly circular, it carried a slight elongation, a subtle stretching that caused the distance between the two worlds to change gently during each revolution. At times the moon drifted slightly closer, at others slightly farther. This quiet breathing of the orbit introduced a rhythm into the gravitational bond between Earth and its companion. The tides responded. The oceans felt the changing distance, rising slightly higher when the moon passed close, settling more gently when it drifted outward along its elliptical path. Water listened carefully to gravity, because gravity remembers every motion, and the moon's motion had only just begun, for the newborn companion still carried within its orbit the lingering echoes of its violent birth. They're echoes that would slowly settle into a deeper balance between two worlds that had once been one. But even as the debris disk faded and the moon took its place beside Earth, another quiet transformation was already beginning. The rotation of the moon itself had not yet stabilized. It spun slowly through space, turning one face toward Earth, then another. But gravity had plans for that motion too, plans written patiently into the deep mathematics of tides and time, because eventually the moon would stop turning freely, and one side of its ancient surface would face Earth forever. The young moon did not yet know stillness. It turned slowly through space, its newly formed surface rotating beneath the distant sun, while the wounded Earth drifted across its sky. Mountains of cooling basalt passed through sunlight and shadow. The vast craters filled with darkness before returning again to pale light. The sphere spun freely then. No single face belonged to the planet below. Every region of its surface looked down upon Earth at some moment, only to turn away again as the rotation continued. The newborn moon carried no permanent orientation yet. Only motion, only the lingering energy of its chaotic birth. But gravity, patient as always, had already begun its quiet persuasion. The Earth was enormous compared to its companion. Its mass reached outward through the emptiness of space, tugging constantly upon the moon's interior. That pull did not simply move the moon along its orbit. It reached deeper. It stretched the body itself. Stone, though rigid, can bend when gravity insists long enough. Inside the moon, the enormous pull of Earth raised subtle tidal bulges in the lunar crust and mantle. These bulges were not visible from afar. They were small distortions, gentle elongations in the moon's shape that aligned loosely with the direction of Earth's gravity. As the moon rotated, those bulges moved across its surface. But they did not move easily. The moon's interior, though partly solidifying, still carried remnants of heat from its formation. Layers of rock slid slowly past one another beneath the crust. When the tidal bulges shifted position during rotation, friction formed inside the moon's body. Stone resisted motion. Energy dissipated. And so, little by little, the rotation began to slow. The change was so subtle that no moment could be named when it first began. Thousands of years passed with barely any noticeable difference. The Thix moon still turned, still revealed new landscapes to Earth's gaze during each orbit. But deep inside its structure, gravity continued whispering its quiet command. Turn slower still. Because the Earth's pull did not disappear when the moon completed a rotation. The tidal bulges it created always tried to align with the direction of Earth itself. Whenever the moon rotated slightly beyond that alignment, the planet's gravity tugged gently at the bulges, pulling them backward. A cosmic break. Slow, unrelenting. Time stretched forward again. Millions of years slipped past like dust drifting through a beam of light. The moon's rotation continued slowing under the steady influence of tidal friction. Each revolution required slightly more time than the last. The once restless spin gradually softened into something calmer. Eventually the rotation approached a curious balance. The time required for the moon to spin once upon its axis began to match the time required for it to complete one orbit around Earth. At first the match was imperfect. The moon still turned slightly faster than its orbit, revealing new portions of its surface during each revolution. But the difference narrowed steadily as gravity continued its quiet work, until finally the rotation stopped changing. The moon had reached equilibrium. Its spin now matched its orbit exactly. From that moment forward, the same hemisphere of the moon faced Earth continuously. The other half turned forever away. This quiet arrangement is known now as tidal locking, a state where gravity has synchronized the rotation of one body with its orbit around another. It is not unusual among celestial companions. Many moons throughout the solar system share this same stillness. But in those ancient ages, the locking of the moon's rotation carried a quiet consequence. Half the moon became familiar to Earth. The other half became a mystery. The face turned toward Earth would remain visible across every future night. Its dark volcanic plains and bright highlands would form patterns that human eyes, billions of years later, would interpret as shapes and stories. But the far side remained hidden, a hemisphere that Earth itself would never see directly, not through naked sight, not through the earliest telescopes. For billions of years, that unseen face would drift through darkness beyond the planet's gaze, and yet the moon did not stop moving. Though its rotation had synchronized with its orbit, the subtle shape of its elliptical path around Earth created a gentle rocking motion in the sky. This motion, known much later as libration, allowed small glimpses beyond the edge of the moon's near side, a slight lean, a subtle nod, just enough to reveal a little more of the hidden hemisphere from time to time. But most of the far side remained concealed, a landscape untouched by human imagination for nearly all of history. While this quiet gravitational balance settled between Earth and its companion, the two bodies continued shaping one another in other ways. The moon drifted slowly outward, the Earth's rotation slowed further. And days lengthened across the planet's turning. The tide softened as distance increased between the two worlds, yet their bond remained strong. The moon continued stabilizing Earth's axial tilt, the gentle lean of the planet's rotation relative to its orbit around the Sun. Without that stabilizing presence, Earth's tilt might have wandered wildly across geological time, swinging the climate into chaotic extremes. But the moon held the axis steady. Its gravity acted like an unseen anchor in the sky, keeping the planet's orientation relatively stable as it moved through the ages. Seasons remained consistent. Climate remained survivable. Life, when it finally emerged, would inherit a world whose stability had been quietly guarded by the pale sphere drifting above. The moon never knew this. It simply circled, silent, patient, and its cratered plains reflecting sunlight across the nights of a planet still learning how to live. And far beyond those nights, beyond the forests and oceans that would eventually appear, the moon carried another quiet difference within its stone. Because the hidden hemisphere, the side that faced forever away from Earth, did not resemble the familiar face below, its crust was thicker, its surface more rugged, its plains fewer and its scars deeper. Two sides of the same world, yet shaped by histories that diverged long ago during the moon's earliest cooling. The reason for that difference remained buried for ages, waiting for the moment when distant machines would finally circle the moon and reveal what had remained unseen since its birth. But even before those machines would arrive, as the moon had already written its deeper story across the tides, the seasons, and the long, quiet stability of Earth itself. A companion shaped by catastrophe, a guardian shaped by gravity, a silent world whose presence had gently guided the unfolding of life below. And still the moon drifted farther away, millimetre by millimetre, year by year, the separation continuing so slowly that even mountains would crumble before the distance became truly large. Yet gravity never entirely forgets. The bond between the two worlds remained. And above every ocean that rose and fell beneath the night sky, the pale face of the moon continued watching, unchanged, patient, carrying the ancient memory of a time when Earth itself had nearly been broken apart. But the moon was not only a relic of the past, it was also a map, and a fossil record of the solar system's earliest violence, preserved within stone that had never known wind or rain. And one day, curious minds from the planet below would look up and begin asking questions that would carry small machines across the silent distance, questions that would finally reveal the hidden face that had waited in darkness for billions of years. Because some memories wait patiently, and the moon had been waiting longer than almost anything else in the sky. The moon settled into its quiet posture beside Earth. One face turned always toward the planet below, the other drifting endlessly through the unobserved dark. The rotation had stilled, the orbit had softened into balance, the chaos of its birth faded slowly into something calmer. Time began its long work of forgetting. Above the Earth, and the moon's pale surface cooled further. The final pockets of internal heat slipped away through ancient fractures in the crust, leaving the interior quiet and rigid. Volcanoes that once spilled lava across its plains fell silent forever. The lunar seas, those dark basaltic plains that would one day resemble shadowed shapes to distant human eyes, hardened into stone that would never again melt. The moon became still, not lifeless perhaps, but finished, its geology no longer restless like the planet below. No tectonic plates drifted across its surface, No oceans gathered to soften its landscapes. No atmosphere wrapped the world in wind or rain. Every mark upon the moon would remain. And so the sky's quiet archivist began its long duty. Across the solar system, the fragments of rock continued wandering through space, leftovers from interplanetary formation that had never found permanent homes. Some passed near Earth and its companion. Many struck. On Earth, those impacts vanished quickly. Atmosphere slowed the smaller fragments until they burned away in streaks of fire across the sky. Larger ones carved temporary scars into the surface, but wind, water, and tectonic motion slowly erased those wounds. Mountains rose and collapsed. Continents drifted. Oceans covered and uncovered ancient basins. Earth forgot its scars, but the moon remembered. Without air or water, every impact etched itself permanently into the lunar crust. Asteroids arriving from distant regions of the solar system slammed into the surface at enormous speeds, releasing bursts of energy that shattered rock and flung debris outward in long arcs. Each collision carved a crater, some small enough to vanish beneath a single shadow, others vast enough to reshape entire regions of the moon's landscape. The scars accumulated, layer upon layer, a geological memory written across stone. During certain distant ages, the bombardment grew particularly intense. Swarms of asteroids drifted inward through the solar system, perhaps stirred by distant gravitational shifts among the giant planets. The moon endured the storm. Its surface trembled beneath repeated impacts that gouged enormous basins into the crust. Some of those basins stretched hundreds of kilometers across, their rims rising like broken rings above the surrounding plains. Inside those deep wounds, something curious happened. The immense energy of the impacts fractured the crust deeply enough for molten rock from the moon's interior to seep upward. Lava filled the basin slowly, spreading across the crater floors in dark seas of basalt. When the lava cooled, it created smooth plains far darker than the surrounding highlands. These plains would later form the familiar shapes visible from Earth, the dark patches that human imagination would call seas, though they contained no water, can mean lunar seas. Silent plains formed from ancient fire. Yet these volcanic floods occurred mostly on the side of the moon facing Earth. The far side remained different. There the crust had grown thicker during the moon's earliest cooling, perhaps influenced by the lingering heat radiating from the young Earth nearby. And that thicker crust resisted the upward flow of magma after impacts, leaving the far side dominated by rugged highlands and dense fields of craters. Two faces, two histories, one familiar to Earth, one hidden in darkness. For billions of years, the hidden hemisphere remained unseen by anything on the planet below. The moon's tidal locking ensured that no human eyes, not even the earliest telescopes, could ever glimpse its far side directly. Only the thin edge revealed itself during the moon's gentle rocking motion across the sky. The rest remained secret, yet the moon continued its quiet service to the world beneath it. The tide still rose, still fell. Earth's rotation slowed gradually across the ages, lengthening the days as tidal friction transferred energy outward into the moon's orbit. With each passing year, the distance between the two worlds increased by a small measure, barely noticeable, yet relentless. The moon drifted outward by centimeters each year, a quiet migration that would continue for billions more. Even so, the gravitational bond endured. The moon still steadied Earth's axial tilt, still guided the rhythm of the oceans, still lit the long nights with the borrowed sunlight. Beneath that pale glow, life finally began its slow awakening within Earth's oceans. Tiny chemical systems formed within tidal pools and deep ocean vents. Molecules learned how to copy themselves. Simple life appeared, fragile and microscopic, drifting within the vast seas stirred by the moon's pull. The moon watched. It did not intervene. It did not know. And yet its presence had helped shape the conditions that allowed those fragile beginnings to survive. A collision had created the moon. But gravity had transformed that scar into something gentler. A guardian of rhythm, a keeper of balance. Across the ages that followed, continents drifted and collided beneath the patient sky. Forests grew where volcanic rock once cooled. Creatures crawled from water onto land, learning slowly how to breathe the air of a world that had long ago survived catastrophe. Above them all, the moon remained constant, unchanging, ancient, its surface still bearing the record of the early solar system like an open book written in stone. Every crater a memory, every basin a fossil of ancient violence, but half that record still lay hidden from Earth's view, and a hemisphere that had waited through the entire history of life without witness, until a new kind of curiosity emerged on the planet below, a species that looked upward and asked quiet questions of the sky, questions about the pale companion that had watched the oceans rise and fall since the beginning, questions about the face that could never be seen, and eventually, those questions would leave the Earth. Machines would rise from the planet's surface and drift across the silent distance, carrying small instruments and fragile signals toward the ancient sphere above. The moon had waited billions of years, and at last, something from Earth was coming to see the side that had always remained in darkness. But what those machines would discover there would deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. Because the hidden face of the moon did not tell the same story as the one Earth had known for ages, it held a different memory, a different geology, a quiet reminder that even familiar companions sometimes keep their deepest truths turned away from view. The moon waited, not with awareness, not with intention, but with the quiet patience of stone that has forgotten how to change. Across billions of years, its pale surface remained nearly identical beneath the drifting sunlight. The same craters endured, the same frozen seas stretched across its visible plains. Shadows moved slowly across mountains that had not eroded since the earliest age of the solar system. The moon did not hurry through time, it simply carried it. Below, Earth became something else entirely. The restless crust shifted endlessly. Continents formed and fractured, drifting slowly across the mantle like rafts wandering across an invisible ocean of heat. Mountains rose, softened, and vanished again. Ice covered entire hemispheres before retreating back toward the poles. Oceans deepened, forests breathed, creatures walked. Above them all, the moon remained suspended in quiet orbit, unchanged while everything else transformed. Yet half of that silent world remained hidden. The far side continued turning through darkness beyond Earth's gaze, its rugged landscape unseen by every civilization that ever watched the moon rise above the horizon. Even the earliest telescopes could reveal only the familiar face. Galileo's lenses glimpsed mountains along the lunar terminator where light met shadow. The later observers mapped the dark plains and bright highlands in careful drawings, tracing the shapes that generations would come to recognize instantly. But the hidden hemisphere remained untouched by human sight. The moon guarded that secret simply by the slow mathematics of tidal locking. The same side always faced Earth, the same landscapes repeating themselves through every cycle of night and day. The unseen face drifted silently beyond the edge of imagination, until curiosity learned how to travel. Centuries passed while human understanding of the sky slowly deepened. Telescopes improved, maps of the moon became more precise. Observatories traced the delicate motion of its orbit with growing accuracy. Still, the far side remained unreachable. No instrument on Earth could see beyond the moon's curved horizon. The hidden half waited in darkness for billions of years more. Then something new rose from the planet below. Not life this time. Machines. Small instruments wrapped in metal and mathematics. Silent travelers launched upward from Earth's surface, carrying delicate electronics and thin antennas designed to speak across the void. The journey between the two worlds was not long by cosmic standards. Only a few days of quiet motion through space, but the meaning of that journey carried the weight of ages. For the first time since the moon had formed from the ashes of a collision, something from Earth was about to circle its companion and look beyond the familiar face. The spacecraft drifted around the moon slowly, its path curving behind the hidden hemisphere where radio signals from Earth briefly vanished into silence. And there, in that sense, the unseen surface finally revealed itself. Cameras turned. Light touched landscapes that had never reflected human curiosity before. The images returned slowly across the vast distance, and what they showed was unexpected. The far side of the moon did not resemble the face known for centuries. Where the near side held wide plains of dark volcanic rock, the hidden hemisphere appeared far more rugged. Mountains crowded together across vast highlands, craters layered upon craters until the landscape seemed almost woven from ancient impacts. The smooth basaltic seas were scarce. The crust there had resisted the volcanic floods that once reshaped the near side. The moon possessed two distinct faces, one shaped partly by ancient lava seas, the other dominated by older highlands scarred by endless bombardment. Why should a single world hold such different histories across its two hemispheres? The answer remained elusive. Some clues pointed back to the moon's earliest cooling, to the time when the newborn Earth still radiated intense heat after the Great Collision. That heat may have influenced how the moon's crust formed, leaving one hemisphere thicker than the other. If the crust on the far side had grown thicker early in the moon's history, molten rock from the interior might have struggled to reach the surface there after later impacts. Volcanic plains would form only where the crust remained thinner. Perhaps that subtle difference had been enough. Perhaps the story was more complicated. The moon offered no explanations. It simply held the evidence, a geological memory preserved in perfect stillness, every crater, every ridge, and every frozen sea of basalt waiting beneath the silent sky. The spacecraft continued circling the moon for many orbits, mapping its hidden hemisphere piece by piece. Each new image added another fragment to the long story written across its surface. But even as knowledge grew, the moon remained quiet. Its ancient landscape spoke only through stone. The far side continued drifting through darkness, unseen from Earth's surface just as it always had. Yet something had changed. The secret was no longer completely hidden. Human curiosity had crossed the ancient boundary of sight and returned with glimpses of the forgotten face. The moon had waited billions of years for that moment, and still it continued drifting outward, centimetre by centimetre, year by year, still stabilising the planet below. Still guiding the slow breath of the ocean, still carrying the silent memory of two worlds that once collided in the deep past. Above forests, above cities, above every ocean tide that rises beneath the quiet night sky. The pale companion continues its orbit, a fossil of cosmic violence transformed into a guardian of planetary balance, a world born from catastrophe that became part of Earth's quiet survival. But the story of the moon is not finished yet, because its slow drift away from Earth carries consequences that stretch far into the future. One day the tides will soften further, the nights will grow darker, and the bond between the two worlds will loosen just enough for gravity to begin writing a different ending. Time has not finished shaping the relationship between Earth and its ancient companion, and it is simply moving slowly, the way it always has. The distance between Earth and the moon continues to grow, not with urgency, not with any visible motion across the sky, but slowly, so slowly that even centuries pass without revealing the change. Each year, the moon drifts away by a measure no wider than a fingernail. A few quiet centimetres. The movement is small enough to seem imaginary. The moon still rises. The tides still breathe along the shores. Night after night, the same pale face returns above the horizon, as though nothing in the heavens has changed. Yet gravity remembers, and time listens. The oceans still move beneath the pull of the moon, but those tides carry more than water. Each rising tide drags slightly against the turning crust of the Earth. Each retreating tide releases that tension again. Stone resists. Water slides. Friction forms along the margins where sea meets land. Energy moves. That energy does not vanish. It transfers itself quietly into the moon's orbit, pushing the distant companion slightly farther away each year. Earth slows, the moon retreats, a conversation written in water and gravity. The earliest days of Earth once passed quickly beneath the sky. When the moon first formed from the debris of the ancient collision, the planet spun rapidly. A day lasted only a handful of hours as the young Earth turned beneath the thick clouds of its early atmosphere. But the tide spoke patiently. Each tidal cycle tugged against that rapid rotation. Over millions of years the spin softened. The length of a day stretched gradually outward. Hours accumulated. The sky moved more slowly. The moon's outward drift carried another quiet effect with it. As distance increases, gravity weakens. The enormous tides of Earth's youth, those great surges that once flooded continents twice each day, slowly calmed into gentler rhythms. Oceans still rose and fell, but their breath softened as the moon continued its gradual migration through the night. Yet the bond between the two worlds did not break. Even across increasing distance, the moon still steadied Earth's tilt, the delicate angle at which the planet leans while circling the sun. Without that stabilizing presence, the planet's axis might wander unpredictably across millions of years. Seasons would shift wildly. Ice ages might stretch across entire hemispheres before vanishing again in chaotic cycles. But the moon holds the tilt steady, a quiet anchor in the sky. And because gravity does not only pull objects closer, sometimes it holds them in balance. Across billions of years, that balance allowed Earth's climate to remain stable enough for life to grow complex. Oceans retained their rhythm. Forests returned after ages of ice. Creatures evolved beneath skies whose patterns did not shift beyond recognition, all while the moon continued drifting outward with silent patience. The distance today is far greater than when the moon first formed. Hundreds of thousands of kilometers separate the two worlds now, a gulf of emptiness where once the moon filled enormous portions of Earth's sky. And still the movement continues, centimetre by centimetre, year by year. One day, far in the future, the outward migration will slow as the exchange of energy between Earth and its companion gradually weakens. Rather, the oceans will no longer transfer enough momentum to push the moon farther away. A quiet equilibrium will arrive. Earth's rotation will have slowed greatly by then. Days will stretch far longer than the 24 hours known today. The moon will hang distant and small in the sky, its tides gentle compared with those of earlier ages. The two worlds will remain companions, but looser, quieter, still bound. Gravity rarely forgets its ancient promises. The moon's surface will remain unchanged through all of it. No wind will soften its mountains. No rain will fill its craters. Every scar from the early solar system will remain etched across its plains as clearly as the day it formed. It will continue watching continents drift and collide, watching oceans open and close, and watching life evolve through ages beyond imagination, from the earliest microbial life drifting in ancient seas, to forests breathing beneath the sun, to creatures lifting their eyes toward the pale sphere above. The moon will witness it all without moving faster than gravity allows. Yet its story reaches even deeper than that companionship, because the moon is more than a partner orbiting Earth. It is also a fossil, a preserved fragment of the early solar system. While Earth reshaped itself endlessly through tectonic motion and erosion, the moon remained unchanged enough to preserve the scars of ancient cosmic violence. Every crater marks the path of an asteroid that once crossed its orbit. Every basin tells of impacts from an age when the solar system was still clearing the remnants of planetary formation. That the moon remembers what Earth has long forgotten, and within that memory lies a deeper understanding of how fragile worlds survive their violent beginnings. The moon exists because Earth once nearly lost itself. A wandering world crossed its path, stone struck stone, planets shattered and reformed. From the ashes rose a companion that would guide the tides, steady the seasons, and light the nights of a planet still learning how to live. Yet even this long story has one final quiet turn waiting ahead. Because the moon itself is not permanent. Nothing shaped by gravity truly is. Far beyond the ages of forests and oceans, long after the continents have shifted into shapes no one today could recognize, the slow dance between Earth and the moon will approach its final chapter. The distance will grow vast. The tides will soften further, the sky will darken, but the memory of the moon written into the oceans, the seasons, and the ancient stone of the Earth itself will remain long after its pale disk has drifted beyond the familiar horizon of the night. Because some companions do not disappear. They simply become part of the story that shaped everything that followed. And the moon has always been part of Earth's memory, a fragment of its beginning, a quiet witness to everything that came after, the pale witness of everything that followed. What remains after a beginning? Not the fire, not the noise, not the violence that once scattered stone across the newborn sky. Those things fade quickly in the long quiet of the universe. What remains is the witness. The moon has always been that witness. Long before oceans found their shores, long before forests breathed their slow green breath into the air, long before the first creature lifted itself from water and placed uncertain limbs upon the land, the moon was already there, watching, not with eyes, but with patience. Its pale surface carried the silence of billions of years, drifting above a planet that would never stop changing. While Earth moved and folded and reshaped itself again and again, the moon remained what it had become in its earliest age. A memory preserved in stone. Below, the world unfolded its restless story. Continents drifted like slow thoughts across the mantle. Mountains rose where plates collided, only to soften beneath wind and rain until they returned again to dust. Oceans opened and closed as the crust shifted beneath them. And ice spread across entire hemispheres and then retreated again toward the poles. Rivers carved valleys into the continents, storms crossed the seas, forests grew and fell in cycles too long for any single creature to understand. Time on Earth moved like weather. Time on the moon moved like silence. Every crater remained where it had formed. Every ridge cast the same shadow it had cast 1 billion years earlier. The dark volcanic plains stayed smooth and untouched by erosion. The moon did not forget. It simply carried the past forward. Above the changing Earth, the pale companion followed its endless path around the planet. Night after night it rose along the horizon, drifting upward through the sky, before fading again into the dawn. Creatures began to notice. At first they did not know what they were seeing. The small eyes in ancient forests watched the pale glow through leaves and branches. No language existed yet to describe it. Only instinct and quiet curiosity stirred beneath the starlight. The moon became part of the night, part of the rhythm of the world. As life grew more complex, awareness deepened. Animals followed the faint glow across the sky. Some hunted beneath its light. Others hid from it in shadows where darkness still lingered. The tides continued breathing along the coasts. Water rose, water fell. The moon's gravity guided those motions with perfect patience. Every shoreline felt the rhythm. Every ocean listened to the distant pull above. Even creatures drifting within the sea moved with that rhythm, rising and falling within waters that obeyed a force far beyond the horizon, and still the moon remained quiet. The centuries unfolded, then the millennia. Eventually a new kind of creature began walking across the continents, one that could remember. Fires burned beneath open skies. Small groups gathered beside rivers and forests. Voices formed languages that slowly grew rich enough to describe the world above them. The moon entered those stories. Some saw faces in its shadows. Some imagined gods walking across its plains. Some believed it carried spirits of the departed. Across deserts and mountains and islands scattered through the seas, human eyes lifted toward the same pale disk that had watched the earth since its molten beginning. But the moon itself never changed. It continued circling quietly, revealing the same familiar face night after night. In its Keksi, dark seas and bright highlands formed patterns that human imagination filled with meaning. Yet those patterns were older than imagination itself. They were scars from an age when planets collided and molten rock reigned across space, a fossil sky. The moon carried that fossil memory through every era of life on Earth. It watched the rise of forests older than mountains. It watched the age of reptiles when giant creatures walked beneath humid skies. It watched continents rearrange themselves slowly across the planet's surface. Through every extinction, through every rebirth, the moon remained, unchanged. A pale witness suspended in the quiet gravity between worlds. Even when human curiosity finally reached outward toward the sky, building instruments to examine the heavens, the launching machines across the silent distance, the moon greeted them with the same ancient face. Craters older than Earth's oldest mountains. Plains of hardened lava frozen since the earliest chapters of the solar system. The machines returned images, measurements, fragments of understanding. And slowly, a realization emerged. The moon was not simply a companion drifting beside Earth. It was part of Earth's own origin. A fragment of the planet's past cast into orbit during a moment of unimaginable violence. A piece of Earth's mantle mixed with the remains of a lost world that once crossed its path. Two planets had collided. From their ashes, the moon had formed. And from that collision, something delicate had followed. A balance that shaped the tides, stabilized the seasons, and quietly guided the conditions that allowed life to flourish. A scar that became a guardian. A catastrophe that became a companion. And still, the moon continues drifting outward through the night. Slowly, quietly, its orbit widening by small measures each year while the Earth below continues its restless transformation. The forests breathe, the oceans move, cities glow beneath the sky, and above them all, the pale witness remains. Watching, not because it chooses to, but because gravity once placed it there. The moon continues its quiet passage. Night after night it rises above the turning Earth, tracing the same slow arc across the sky that it has followed since the earliest oceans gathered beneath it. The forests change, the rivers shift their paths, but civilizations appear and fade like brief flickers along the edges of continents. Yet the moon remains almost exactly as it was. Its mountains are still sharp, its craters still deep, its silent plains still hold the memory of lava that once flowed when the solar system itself was young. Nothing moves there except light. Sunlight drifts across the surface each month, sliding slowly over ridges and valleys before retreating again into darkness. 2 weeks of day, 2 weeks of night. The rhythm repeats endlessly beneath a sky that never carries wind. The moon does not age the way Earth does. It simply accumulates time, layer upon layer of quiet history resting across its stone. Each impact scar holds the echo of an ancient moment when something wandered too close and shattered against the surface. And each basin remembers a collision older than nearly every mountain that still rises on Earth today. It is a library written without words, a fossil of the early solar system preserved in pale dust. While Earth forgets its beginnings again and again beneath oceans and tectonic motion, the moon remembers, and it remembers patiently. Even now, long after its birth from molten catastrophe, the moon continues drifting farther from the planet below. The movement is slow enough that no eye watching the sky can perceive it. Centimetre by centimetre the distance grows, stretching the gravitational thread that binds the two worlds together. But the thread still holds. The tides still answer. Her water continues rising towards the moon's distant pull, before settling again against the shorelines of continents that did not yet exist when the moon was born. Time settles over the Earth the way dust settles across the lunar plains. Quietly, layer by layer. Creatures walk beneath the night sky and pause for a moment when the moon rises above the horizon. Some see a calm companion drifting among the stars. Some see a lantern guiding travellers through darkness. Some see only a pale reflection of sunlight. Few realize that the moon is older than almost everything else they know. Older than the mountains. Older than the oceans as they exist today. Older even than the life that once struggled to begin within tidal pools along the earliest shores. The moon was already there, watching the seas gather, watching the continents move. They're watching the long unfolding of a planet that would one day ask questions about its own past. And perhaps the strangest part of the story is this. The moon should not have existed in quite this way. Its size, its orbit, its composition, each of these details carries a quiet improbability. The collision that created it required a precise angle, a precise speed, a precise distribution of material between two worlds whose paths crossed only once in the vast patience of the solar system. Too direct, and Earth might have shattered. Too gentle, and the debris might never have gathered into a stable companion. But the encounter occurred exactly as gravity allowed. Stone struck stone, stone. Planets reshaped one another, and from that moment emerged a world whose presence would guide the tides, steady the axis of the Earth, and illuminate the nights of a planet still learning how to live. The moon is not merely an object drifting through space, it is a consequence, a memory, a quiet echo of the moment when two worlds touched and became something new. Even now its pale surface carries that memory across every revolution around the Earth. The same face turns toward the planet each night, revealing its ancient plains and silent craters to eyes that cannot quite imagine the violence that once created them. The hidden hemisphere still drifts beyond view, its rugged highlands passing through darkness on the far side of the orbit. Two faces, one familiar, one forever turned away. The moon remains exactly what it has always been, a fragment of Earth's earliest story, a companion born from catastrophe, a silent witness to everything that followed. And far in the future, long after mountains have crumbled and oceans have shifted into shapes no map today could recognize, the moon will still be there, drifting slowly outward, watching the slow breathing of the seas, carrying the fossil memory of the moment when the young Earth once nearly forgot how to exist. Because time does not erase everything. Some events remain written into the sky itself, and so the question returns quietly. The way distant waves return to the shore after travelling across an unseen ocean of night. What if the moon is not what it seems? Not simply a pale stone circling the Earth, but a memory the planet never finished remembering. A scar that became a companion. A fragment of the Earth's own beginning, still drifting through the quiet sky above every ocean, every forest, every sleeping city. And the moon rises again, softly, patiently, exactly as it has for billions of years. And somewhere within its silent stone the ancient collision still echoes, not as fire or noise, but as presence, a pale witness in the sky, watching the long dream of Earth continue beneath it.